In the vast expanse of the galactic frontier, where towering alien warriors measure worth by size and strength alone, a single human stands barely shoulder-high to the smallest of them. Marcus Chen, at 5 feet 4 inches, represents everything the Korthak hunting clans despise about the soft meat species from Earth. But when the galaxy's most feared apex predator, a creature that has terrorized entire star systems, begins stalking their remote outpost, these mighty hunters will discover that the most dangerous predators often come in the smallest packages. What happens when raw human cunning meets alien pride? When a species built for endurance faces those bred for power? When the hunt becomes so deadly that even the pack's legendary alpha must choose between ancient tradition and survival itself? Some lessons can only be learned in blood. Some respect can only be earned through fire. And some humans are far more terrifying than any monster the galaxy has ever known. The hunt is about to begin. But who is really the prey? The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the supply depot like 1,000 angry fists, each drop carrying the metallic tang of Zurian Prime's atmosphere. Marcus Chen pressed his back against the wall, listening to the rhythmic pounding while his fingers worked methodically through his equipment check. His plasma rifle felt solid in his hands, its weight familiar and comforting despite the hostile glares he'd been receiving all morning. Across the dimly lit staging area, the Korthak hunting party prepared their gear with the practiced efficiency of apex predators. Each warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, their reptilian scales shifting between deep emerald and midnight black depending on their mood. Thick corded muscles rippled beneath their natural armor as they hefted weapons that would have required 2 humans to lift. Their amber eyes, designed for tracking prey across multiple spectrums of light, occasionally flicked toward Marcus with undisguised contempt. "Look at the little soft skin," rumbled Vexstar, the largest of the hunting party after their alpha. His massive jaw split into what passed for a grin among his species, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Tell me again why we allow this serrated tree, Ting, to accompany us on the great hunt." The other hunters clicked their approval, a sound like grinding stone that reverberated through the depot. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his grip on the rifle tightened imperceptibly. 3 months he'd been stationed on this godforsaken rock. 3 months of enduring their mockery and derision. The Galactic Council had assigned him here as part of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, but the Korthak clearly viewed him as little more than a pet. Zephyran, a scarred veteran whose left eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant, spat into the dust. "The human thing serves one purpose only. When the great beast comes, we throw it in the opposite direction and escape while the creature feeds." The laughter that followed was like the sound of avalanches, deep and threatening. Marcus had heard variations of this joke dozens of times, but something about the way Zephyran's remaining organic eye glittered made his skin crawl. These weren't empty threats anymore. The hunt they were preparing for wasn't some routine predator culling. For the past 6 weeks, something had been systematically destroying Korthak settlements across the Outer Rim. Not just attacking them. Destroying them so completely that forensic teams could barely identify what species the victims had belonged to. The few survivors spoke in whispers of something impossible, something that moved like shadow and struck like lightning. The Korthak High Command had assembled their finest hunting party to track down this threat, and somehow, through bureaucratic oversight or cosmic joke, Marcus had been included. Enough. The single word cut through the laughter like a blade through silk. Every Korthak in the depot immediately fell silent, their postures shifting to barely contained respect mixed with primal fear. Alpha Thrakmor emerged from the shadows near the back of the depot, his presence seeming to draw light from the room itself. Where the other hunters were merely large, Thrakmor was enormous. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, his scales had long since shifted to the deep black that marked true alphas of his species. Ancient scars crisscrossed his hide like a roadmap of countless battles, and his eyes held an intelligence that Marcus had learned to respect, if not trust. Unlike his subordinates, Thrakmor had never mocked the human directly. He simply ignored him, which somehow felt worse. "The human stays," Thrakmor continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Council orders are clear. We demonstrate interspecies cooperation, or we lose access to their advanced tracking technology." Vexstar's jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed a response. "Yes, Alpha." "But surely the human can remain here at base camp. Monitor communications. Prepare supplies." Marcus finally spoke up, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "With respect, I've reviewed the mission parameters. My assignment is as a field operative, not support staff. The silence that followed was pregnant with violence. Several of the hunters actually took half steps toward him, claws extending unconsciously. Marcus held his ground, knowing that showing weakness now would make the next few days unbearable. Assuming he survived them, Thrakmor's massive head turned toward Marcus, amber eyes studying him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. You believe you can keep pace with a Korthak hunting party, human? I believe I can contribute meaningfully to the mission, Alpha. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Thrakmor's features. Contribute, yes. Your species does have certain unique traits. Very well. You will accompany the hunt, but understand this. Marcus Chen of Earth, you are the smallest, weakest member of this party. If you cannot maintain our pace, you will be left behind. If you endanger the hunt through your limitations, you will be removed from the equation permanently. Am I understood? Marcus met the Alpha's gaze directly, a gesture that caused several hunters to hiss in surprise. Among the Korthak, direct eye contact with an Alpha was either a challenge or a death wish. Understood, Alpha. Thrakmor held the stare for a long moment before nodding once. Then we begin. Gear check in 5 minutes. We track north toward the Grinding Peaks. Intelligence suggests our quarry has established a territory there. As the hunters began their final preparations, Marcus found himself oddly grateful for the rain. It would wash away their scent, make tracking more difficult for whatever was out there. He'd read the reports, studied the kill patterns and forensic data. Whatever they were hunting wasn't just another apex predator, it was something new. Something that seemed to understand Korthak tactics better than the Korthak themselves. His equipment was lighter than the others. Human engineering prioritized efficiency over raw power. While the hunters carried weapons that could punch through starship hull plating, Marcus had chosen gear optimized for mobility and endurance. His rifle used focused plasma bursts rather than the wide-area devastation favored by Korthak weapons. His armor was a flexible weave of synthetic fibers that could stop most projectiles while weighing less than a Korthak ceremonial shoulder guard. Planning to run at the first sign of trouble, soft skin? Zafran asked, noticing Marcus's relatively light loadout. Planning to be alive at the end of the hunt, Marcus replied evenly. The scarred warrior's remaining eye narrowed. We shall see. 20 minutes later, they emerged from the depot into the driving rain. The settlement around them was a collection of prefabricated structures and ancient stone buildings, most empty now that word of the creature's presence had spread. Smart colonists had evacuated to the inner systems. The remainder huddled in their homes, hoping that Alpha Thrakmor's hunting party would end their nightmare. Marcus fell into step behind the main group, his shorter stride requiring more steps to match their pace, but managing to keep up nonetheless. The Korthak moved with surprising grace for their size, their natural hunting instincts, allowing them to navigate the rough terrain with minimal noise. Marcus had to admit they were impressive predators in their natural element. The path led upward into the foothills of the Grinding Peaks, where ancient geological activity had created a maze of canyons, caves, and rocky outcroppings. Perfect hunting ground for something that preferred ambush tactics. The rain continued to fall, reducing visibility and making the already treacherous terrain even more dangerous. As they climbed, Marcus noticed something that made his survival instincts scream warnings. The local wildlife was wrong. Not just absent, that would be normal in the presence of a large predator, but the few creatures they did encounter were behaving erratically, almost as if they were being herded or controlled somehow. A flock of native birds burst from cover ahead of them, their flight pattern chaotic and panicked. Normal predator activity wouldn't cause such widespread disruption. Whatever was out there wasn't just hunting, it was playing with the ecosystem itself. Alpha, Marcus called softly, knowing his voice would carry to Thrakmor despite the rain. The wildlife patterns are anomalous. Thrakmor raised his massive hand, bringing the party to an immediate halt. His head tilted slightly, listening to sounds beyond human perception. After a long moment, he nodded grimly. The human is correct. Something drives the prey beasts toward us. Vextar's scales shifted to a deeper green, indicating heightened alert status. A trap? Perhaps. Or perhaps our quarry is more intelligent than anticipated. Thrakmor's amber eyes swept the surrounding terrain, cataloging potential ambush points and escape routes. Form defensive positions. Watch the high ground. The hunters spread out with military precision, each taking cover behind the scattered boulders that dotted the hillside. Marcus found himself crouched behind a rock formation that provided good sight lines but minimal actual protection. His human-designed gear felt inadequate compared to the heavy armor surrounding him. Minutes passed. The rain continued its relentless assault, but underneath the white noise of precipitation, Marcus began to detect something else. A subtle wrongness in the ambient sound, like an echo where there should be none. His enhanced hearing, a gift of human genetic engineering, picked up frequencies that the Korthak couldn't perceive. Movement, subtle, controlled, professional. Something was circling them, staying just beyond visual range but definitely present. Marcus's rifle scope included thermal imaging, but the rain and the creature's apparent ability to mask its heat signature made detailed scanning impossible. Then he saw it. A shadow that moved independently of the clouds above, flowing across the ground like liquid darkness. For just an instant he caught a glimpse of something impossible, a shape that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, with limbs that bent in directions that violated several laws of physics. "Contact," Marcus whispered into his comm unit. 11 o'clock high, moving fast. The reaction was immediate. 15 Korthak warriors spun towards his indicated position, weapons charging with the distinctive whine of exotic matter cores spinning up to full power. But there was nothing there now. Just empty air and falling rain. "I see nothing," Vextar growled. "The human jumps at shadows." But Thrakmor's expression had gone cold and calculating. "No. He sees what we cannot. The creature uses abilities beyond our normal spectrum. Human sensory organs function differently." As if in response to being spotted, the thing in the shadows seemed to pause. Marcus felt a peculiar sensation, like being examined under a microscope by something vast and unknowable. Then the presence was gone, vanished so completely that he might have imagined it. "It's gone," he reported, but kept his weapon ready. "Gone? Or repositioning?" Thrakmor asked. Before Marcus could answer, Zephran's voice crackled over the comm from his position 50 meters to their left. "Movement in the canyon below. Multiple contacts converging on our position." What happened next would be burned into Marcus's memory forever. The attack came from every direction simultaneously, as if their enemy had somehow multiplied itself or called in reinforcements that defied conventional sensor sweeps. Dark shapes flowed up the canyon walls like living smoke, moving with impossible speed and coordination. The first casualty was Corventhal, a young hunter who had the misfortune of being positioned furthest from the main group. One moment he was crouched behind cover, the next he was simply gone. No scream, no sound of struggle. Just empty space where an 8-foot warrior had been standing. "Defensive perimeter!" Thrakmor's roar cut through the chaos as the hunters opened fire. Exotic energy beams lit up the hillside, turning the falling rain into prismatic curtains of superheated steam. The sound was deafening, like standing inside a thunderstorm, armed with the wrath of gods. But their enemy wasn't there anymore. Every shot passed harmlessly through empty air while the dark shapes continued their impossible dance around the perimeter, always just beyond targeting range. Marcus tracked one with his scope, leading the target according to human ballistic training, and squeezed off a burst of focused plasma. To his amazement, something shrieked in the darkness, not a roar of pain or anger, but something far more alien, a sound like reality itself being torn apart. One of the shadows stumbled, became momentarily visible as a writhing mass of too many joints and surfaces that hurt to look at directly. The human drew blood. Vextar's surprise was audible even over the weapon's fire. Marcus didn't have time to feel proud. The wounded creature's companions were already adapting to his tactics, moving in patterns that made targeting impossible even for his enhanced reflexes. But he'd learned something crucial. They could be hurt, which meant they could be killed. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. 3 more hunters vanished in the chaos, taken so quickly and quietly that their disappearance wasn't noticed until Thrakmor called for a head count. The survivors found themselves surrounded by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. And in the center of it all, the small human continued to fire with mechanical precision, his shots the only ones that seemed to connect with their targets. Each hit drew another impossible shriek from the darkness, proving that size and strength weren't the only measures of a warrior's worth. The storm was just beginning. The aftermath of the first assault left the hunting party shaken in ways that went beyond mere tactical setbacks. Korthak warriors were bred for combat, raised from birth to face down creatures that would send most species fleeing in terror. But this enemy challenged everything they understood about predator and prey dynamics. Marcus crouched beside what remained of Corventhal's position, studying the ground with the methodical attention that had made humans such effective persistence hunters. The young Korthak had simply vanished, but the disturbed soil and unusual energy readings told a story that made his blood run cold. "No struggle marks," he reported to Thrakmor, who loomed over the scene like a shadow of barely contained violence. Whatever took him was fast enough that he couldn't react, and precise enough to avoid leaving traditional forensic evidence. The Alpha's amber eyes studied the human with new interest. Where before there had been dismissive tolerance, now Marcus detected something approaching professional respect. You read sign like a true hunter. What else do you see? Marcus pointed to a series of barely visible depressions in the muddy ground. The creature has weight, but distributes it differently than anything in our databases. These impressions suggest multiple limbs, but they shift configuration, sometimes bipedal, sometimes something else entirely. Vextar, whose green scales now showed stress patterns of deep amber, studied the markings with growing unease. Shapeshifters? That would explain the sensor difficulties. More than that. Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing through the tactical implications. I think we're dealing with something that can manipulate localized space-time. That would account for the impossible movement speeds and the ability to seemingly vanish. The remaining 12 hunters exchanged glances heavy with meaning. Their mythology spoke of creatures that existed between dimensions, things that walked in the spaces between spaces. But those were legends used to frighten young cubs, not tactical realities. Thrakmor's massive jaw worked silently for a moment before he spoke. If you are correct, human, then conventional hunting tactics are worthless. These creatures don't simply inhabit this dimension, they travel through it like water. Before Marcus could respond, Zephran's voice crackled over their comm system from his forward observation post. Alpha, you need to see this. The canyon ahead, it's wrong. The party advanced cautiously toward Zephran's position, weapons ready and senses straining for any sign of their impossible enemy. What they found defied rational explanation. The canyon that should have continued for several kilometers simply ended in a wall of what appeared to be crystallized space itself. By the ancient fires, breathed Nexus Wrath, the party's tracker. His cybernetic enhancements were sparking erratically, unable to process the readings they were receiving. My sensors show this barrier extends in all directions, but also somehow doesn't exist. Marcus approached the anomaly carefully, his human-designed equipment apparently less susceptible to whatever interference the barrier generated. His readings were bizarre but consistent. The wall registered as both infinitely dense and completely permeable, existing in a state of quantum superposition that shouldn't be possible in normal space-time. It's a dimensional fold, he announced, the words feeling strange in his mouth. They've created a localized distortion that allows them to control the terrain itself. Thrakmor joined him at the barrier, one massive hand extended toward the impossible surface. Can we breach it? Maybe. But the energy requirements would be enormous and we don't know what's on the other side. Marcus paused, studying his readings more carefully. Actually, I'm getting some interesting data here. The fold isn't perfect. There are stress points where it interfaces with normal space-time. He highlighted several locations on his tactical display where the readings showed fluctuations. If we could apply concentrated force at these specific points simultaneously, we might be able to destabilize the entire structure. Vextar's expression had shifted to something approaching admiration. The human proposes coordinated strikes against targets we cannot even properly perceive, either brilliant or suicidal. Often the same thing in warfare, Marcus replied, burning what might have been chuckles from several hunters. But before they could implement any assault on the barrier, the decision was made for them. The crystallized wall began to ripple like liquid mercury, its surface flowing and reshaping itself. Through the distortion came movement, not the shadow creatures from before, but something far worse. The thing that emerged was a nightmare fusion of biological evolution and interdimensional physics. Its core body appeared vaguely humanoid, but that was where any resemblance to known life forms ended. Its limbs bent through angles that existed in more than 3 dimensions, allowing it to reach around cover that should have provided absolute protection. Its head, if the writhing mass of sensory organs could be called a head, tracked targets across multiple spectrums of reality simultaneously, but most terrifying of all were its eyes. Not the simple optical organs that most species possessed, but windows into spaces between spaces, each one showing a different possible outcome of the battle about to unfold. In some, the hunters stood victorious. In others, only blood and silence remained. Dimensional predator, Thrakmor growled, his voice carrying notes of primal recognition. The ancient enemy. We thought them extinct. The creature's response was not sound, but something felt directly in their minds. Amusement mixed with hunger, intelligence both vast and utterly alien. It had been studying them, learning their tactics and weaknesses. The previous attack had been reconnaissance. This was the actual hunt beginning. Marcus raised his weapon but found his movement sluggish, as if he were moving through thick fluid. The creature's presence was affecting local time flow, giving it advantages beyond mere physical superiority. Around him, the Korthak hunters were experiencing similar effects. Their legendary speed reduced to slow-motion parodies of combat effectiveness. Then, Marcus noticed something the others had missed. His human chronometer, designed for interstellar navigation, was still maintaining accurate time readings. Whatever field the creature projected affected Korthak physiology more severely than human biology. He was still slowed, but not paralyzed. Moving with every ounce of speed he could muster, Marcus dove toward a cluster of boulders that would provide partial cover. His plasma rifle whined as he adjusted its settings to maximum penetration, trading rate of fire for raw stopping power. The creature's interdimensional nature might make it difficult to target, but energy weapons operated according to different rules than conventional projectiles. His first shot carved through what he hoped was the creature's torso, drawing another of those reality-tearing shrieks. The temporal distortion flickered, allowing the Korthak hunters to regain normal movement for a precious few seconds. They didn't waste the opportunity. 15 weapons discharged simultaneously, turning the canyon into a hell of superheated plasma and exotic matter interactions. The dimensional predator writhed under the assault, its form becoming increasingly unstable as the concentrated firepower overwhelmed whatever defenses it possessed. But as it died, the creature did something that froze Marcus's blood. It smiled, not with any physical feature, but with a telepathic projection of pure, malevolent satisfaction. They had won this battle, but something about that smile suggested victory. Was exactly what the creature had wanted. The barrier dissolved as the predator's form collapsed into component atoms, revealing the canyon beyond. But where there should have been empty terrain, Marcus counted at least 30 more of the shadow creatures waiting in perfect formation. The dimensional predator hadn't been their enemy, it had been a herald. "Tactical withdrawal," Thrakmor commanded, his professional instincts overriding any consideration of warrior pride. Fighting retreat to defensible positions. As they fell back through the canyon system, Marcus found himself running alongside warriors who had mocked him only hours before. But there was no mockery now, only the grim determination of professionals who recognized superior tactics when they saw them. "Human," Vextar called out between bursts of covering fire. "Your weapon modifications, can they be replicated on our equipment?" Marcus ducked as something that might have been a claw scraped sparks from the rock inches from his head. "Possibly, but we'd need time to recalibrate the exotic matter matrices. Then we make time." Thrakmor's voice carried absolute authority. "These creatures hunt us now, but that can be turned to advantage. We choose the ground for the next engagement." They reached a natural fortress formation in the canyon walls just as the first wave of shadow creatures began their pursuit. The defensive position was far from ideal. Limited sightlines, only one escape route, and no overhead cover, but it would have to suffice. As Marcus helped the hunters establish overlapping fields of fire, he couldn't shake the memory of that dying creature's smile. 30 shadow creatures were dangerous, but manageable with proper tactics and coordinated fire. What worried him was what came after. Creatures this sophisticated wouldn't operate without a larger strategy. "Alpha," he called out as he finished calibrating Vextar's weapon systems. "I think we're being herded. The attack patterns, the timing, they're designed to push us toward specific locations." Thrakmor's amber eyes studied the approaching shadows with new understanding. A trap within a trap, but for what purpose? The answer came in the form of seismic readings on Marcus's geological scanner. Something massive was moving beneath the canyon floor, something that dwarfed even the dimensional predator they'd just killed. The shadows hadn't been trying to kill them, they'd been driving them toward a feeding ground. "Underground movement," Marcus reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Estimate size at roughly 50 meters in length, moving in patterns consistent with a burrowing apex predator. Zephran's cybernetic eye glowed brighter as he accessed deeper scanning protocols. "Confirmed. Energy readings suggest this creature is orders of magnitude more powerful than anything we've encountered. It's using the shadow creatures as beaters, driving prey toward its hunting ground." The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate with increasingly violent tremors. Loose rocks cascaded from the canyon walls as something impossibly large moved through the bedrock itself. Marcus's enhanced hearing caught new sounds. The grinding of stone, the whisper of displaced air, and underneath it all, a sound like the universe itself breathing. "How long until it reaches us?" Thrakmor demanded. Marcus checked his readings, running calculations through his combat computer. At current rate of movement, approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes to prepare for a battle against something that treated solid rock like water, commanded interdimensional creatures as hunting hounds, and apparently fed on entire hunting parties of apex predators. Marcus had faced long odds before, but nothing quite like this. Around him, the Korthak hunters were displaying the calm professionalism that had made their species legendary throughout the galaxy. Weapons were checked, positions optimized, and final preparations made with the efficiency of those who had faced death many times and found it wanting. But Marcus noticed something else in their movements. A subtle deference to his tactical suggestions, a willingness to follow human-developed strategies that would have been unthinkable hours before. Respect, hard-earned through competence under fire. Human, Thrakmor said quietly, settling into position beside Marcus's chosen firing point. If we survive this hunt, your people will have gained great honor among the Korthak. If we survive, Marcus replied, checking his weapon's power levels one final time, we'll all have earned that honor together. The ground cracked open like an egg, and something that defied description began to emerge. The creature that erupted from the canyon floor made their previous enemies seem like mere annoyances in comparison. Marcus's first glimpse of the thing burned itself into his memory with the intensity of a plasma strike, a writhing mass of crystalline segments each larger than a Korthak warrior, connected by joints that existed in dimensions his human brain could barely comprehend. Its head, if the term applied to the complex array of sensory organs and feeding apparatus at its front end, rose 50 feet above the canyon floor. Ancient intelligence gleamed in eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall across multiple galaxies. This wasn't just an apex predator. It was a force of nature, given form and malevolent purpose. The shadow creatures that had been pursuing them suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't independent hunters, but extensions of this central mind, remote sensors and manipulators that allowed it to feed without ever leaving its underground domain. How many hunting parties had vanished into its gullet over the centuries, never understanding they were facing a distributed consciousness that operated across multiple levels of reality. Mother of the Void, whispered Nexus Wrath, his tracking system sparking as they attempted to process readings that defied conventional physics. It's not just large, it exists partially outside normal space-time. My instruments show it as both here and not here simultaneously. Marcus forced himself to focus on tactical realities rather than the existential horror of their situation. His human-designed equipment was still providing more reliable data than the Korthak systems, possibly because human technology had been developed by a species that regularly dealt with quantum uncertainties. Energy distribution patterns suggest multiple vulnerable points, he reported, highlighting targets on their shared tactical display. The joints between segments show structural stress, and there are what appear to be sensory clusters that might be disrupted by concentrated fire. Thrakmor studied the targeting data with the calm efficiency of a predator evaluating prey, even though in this case the roles were clearly reversed. Coordinated strikes on the joint segments. If we can impair its mobility, we might have a chance. Alpha, Vexstar called out, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. The creature is not alone. He was correct. More shapes were emerging from the rent in the canyon floor, not additional creatures of the same type, but a horrifying variety of predators that had no business existing in the same ecosystem. Things with too many teeth, entities that seemed to be constructed from crystallized darkness, and worst of all, creatures that appeared to be wearing the faces of previous hunting parties. Interdimensional collection, Marcus realized with growing horror. It doesn't just feed on its prey, it preserves them, adds them to its hunting pack. Among the emerging horrors, he recognized Korthak features twisted into impossible configurations. Warriors who had faced this thing in previous encounters, now serving as its unwilling servants. The implications were staggering. Not just death, but eternal servitude to an entity that existed beyond normal understanding of mortality. The massive creature's attention fixed on their defensive position with the intensity of a star going nova. When it spoke, the words bypassed their auditory systems entirely, manifesting directly in their minds like parasitic thoughts that carried the weight of geological ages. Korthak flesh, familiar taste? Many have fed me over the cycles, but this new taste, this human scent, unknown. Curious, will sample slowly. Its voice carried undertones of vast amusement, as if their resistance was an entertaining novelty rather than a genuine threat. Marcus felt his survival instincts screaming warnings as the creature's attention focused specifically on him. Being noticed by something this ancient and powerful was like standing in the path of an avalanche, certain death, but with the added horror of knowing it was personal. Concentrated fire on the joint segments, Thrakmor commanded, his voice cutting through the paralyzing terror that threatened to overwhelm them. All weapons maximum penetration settings. The canyon erupted in focused destruction as 15 Korthak weapons discharged simultaneously, their exotic matter cores pushed far beyond safe operational limits. The resulting energy release would have vaporized most conventional targets, but the creature merely shuddered under the assault, its crystalline segments showing stress fractures but remaining functional. Marcus had been studying the thing's structure during the bombardment, his human pattern recognition systems working overtime to identify weaknesses. What he found made his blood run cold. The creature wasn't just protected by its size and interdimensional nature, it was learning from each attack, its defensive systems adapting in real time to counter their tactics. "It's analyzing our weapons," he announced. "Each subsequent shot is less effective. We need to vary our approach constantly." But even as he spoke, Marcus realized the futility of their situation. They had perhaps enough ammunition for 2 more concentrated bombardments before their weapons were depleted. The creature showed no signs of serious damage, and its collection of preserved predators was advancing steadily toward their position. That was when Thrakmor did something that would be remembered in Korthak legend for generations to come. The massive alpha stood up from cover, exposing himself fully to the creature's attention. His scales had shifted to the deep black that indicated a Korthak facing their death challenge, and his voice carried the ritual cadences of ancient ceremony. "I am Thrakmor of the Golden Claws, Alpha of the Third Hunt Pride, descendant of those who first walked between the stars. I challenge you, Ancient One, to single combat for the lives of my pack." The creature's attention shifted entirely to the Alpha, its massive form reorienting with surprising grace. When it responded, there was something like pleasure in its mental voice. "Alpha scent, strong. Many Alphas have fed me, each thinking their strength sufficient. You offer yourself for the weak ones?" Thrakmor's reply was firm and without hesitation. "I offer myself for my pack, all of them." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized what the Alpha was doing. The creature's hunting instincts would be triggered by a direct challenge, especially from a recognized pack leader. If Thrakmor could hold its attention long enough, the others might have a chance to escape, but the small human had no intention of allowing the Alpha to sacrifice himself. "Negative, Alpha," Marcus said quietly, checking his weapon's power levels one final time. "I have a better idea." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus vaulted over the defensive barrier and sprinted directly toward the creature's main body. His movement was so unexpected, so tactically insane, that even the ancient predator seemed momentarily confused by his actions. Marcus had noticed something during his analysis of the creature's structure. The energy flows that connected its various segments followed patterns similar to human neural networks, just scaled up to cosmic proportions. If he was right about the creature's distributed consciousness, there would be processing nodes at specific junction points. His plasma rifle whined as he pushed it beyond safe operating parameters, channeling every remaining joule of power into a single, focused beam. Instead of targeting the heavily armored segments, he aimed for a cluster of delicate sensory organs that his analysis suggested served as a primary neural interface. The shot connected with surgical precision, and the creature's reaction was immediate and devastating. Its mental screen tore through the canyon like a physical force, shattering stone and overloading every electronic system within a kilometer radius. The thing's massive body convulsed, its interdimensional nature becoming unstable as critical processing systems went offline. But Marcus's desperate gambit came with a price. The energy feedback from his overloaded weapon sent him flying through the air, his body impacting the canyon wall with bone-breaking force. As consciousness faded, he heard Thrakmor's roar of challenge and the sound of an Alpha entering battle. When awareness returned, Marcus found himself propped against a boulder, with Zephyran applying field medical treatment to what felt like every bone in his body. The scarred veteran's remaining organic eyes showed something Marcus had never seen there before: genuine concern.
"The human lives," Zephyran announced to the others.
Broken ribs, internal bleeding, but nothing that cannot be treated. Marcus tried to speak, managing only a raspy whisper. "Alpha?" Zephyran's expression grew grim. "Fighting. Your strike disrupted the creature's coordination, but did not kill it. Thrakmor battles its main body while we deal with the collection." Through pain-blurred vision, Marcus could see the ongoing battle. The creature was indeed damaged. Its movements were less coordinated, its attacks less precise, but it remained a terrifyingly effective predator. Thrakmor fought with the fury of a true Alpha, his weapons carving chunks from the creature's crystalline segments, but he was clearly overmatched. The collected predators, deprived of their controller's full attention, had become more chaotic in their attacks. This made them less tactically effective, but also less predictable. turning the battle into a desperate melee that could only end in mutual destruction. "Help me up," Marcus managed, though every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his battered body. "You cannot fight, human. You have done enough." "Not fighting." Marcus fumbled for his equipment pack, finding the emergency beacon that all council operatives carried. "Calling reinforcements." Vexstar, overhearing from his position, looked skeptical. "The nearest council forces are days away. We will be long dead before—" His words were cut off as something impossible happened. The emergency beacon's activation triggered not just a distress signal, but a localized space-time anomaly. The device had been modified with technology that Marcus wasn't supposed to know about, upgrades that only became available when the user's vital signs indicated imminent death. A rift opened in the canyon wall, and through it stepped figures that made even the ancient creature pause in its assault on Thrakmor. Human soldiers, but not ordinary ones. Enhanced warriors from Earth's Special Operations Division, equipped with weapons and armor that incorporated lessons learned from centuries of interstellar warfare. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing features that shared Marcus's basic genetic template, but enhanced to superhuman levels. Emergency Extraction Team, responding to Council Operative Distress Signal. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen. Status report." Marcus managed a weak smile despite the pain. "Sister, good timing." The creature, recognizing a new and potentially more dangerous threat, began to retreat towards its underground lair. But Commander Chen's team had come prepared for exactly this type of interdimensional predator. Their weapons fired not just energy, but concentrated bursts of crystallized time itself, attacks that could damage entities existing partially outside normal space. The battle that followed was brief but spectacular. The creature found itself facing opponents who understood its nature and had developed specific countermeasures. Within minutes, the ancient predator was reduced to rapidly dissolving exotic matter, its collection of preserved hunters collapsing as their binding energy dissipated. Thrakmor, battered but victorious, approached Marcus with something approaching reverence. The human called his pack to aid ours. "This is unprecedented." Marcus tried to stand, accepting support from both his sister and the Korthak Alpha. Among humans, Alpha, pack loyalty extends beyond individual units. We are all part of the same greater pack. Thrakmor studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Then humanity has earned a place among the Korthak, not as subordinates, but as equals in the hunt." The formal recognition carried weight beyond mere words. In Korthak society, being acknowledged as equal hunters was the highest honor possible. But as Marcus looked around at the surviving members of the hunting party, he realized something more important had been accomplished. They were no longer separate species cooperating out of political necessity. They had become something new, a true mixed pack, bonded by shared danger and mutual respect, earned in blood and fire. The hunt was ending, but something greater was just beginning. The medical bay on the human extraction ship was not designed for Korthak physiology, but Commander Sarah Chen's team had adapted their equipment with the pragmatic efficiency that characterized human military operations. Marcus watched from his recovery bed as Doc Martinez worked on Vexstar's plasma burns with the same professional care he would show any human soldier. "Your pack leader fights infection well," Martinez reported to Thrakmor, who had refused medical attention until all his warriors were treated first. "The Korthak immune system is remarkably resilient. He'll be back to full combat effectiveness within 48 hours. The Alpha's amber eyes studied the human medic with newfound respect. "You tend our wounded as your own. This is not typical behavior among predator species." Sarah, monitoring the conversation while reviewing tactical reports, looked up from her datapad. "Among humans, Alpha, wounded warriors are never abandoned. Our pack bonds don't weaken when blood is spilled. They grow stronger." The statement carried implications that went far beyond medical protocol. Over the past 6 hours, as both species worked together to treat injuries and process the battle's aftermath, barriers that had seemed insurmountable were quietly dissolving. Korthak warriors found themselves sharing combat stories with human soldiers, discovering that bravery and tactical wisdom transcended species boundaries. Marcus had been observing these interactions with the analytical mind that made him effective in diplomatic situations. What he witnessed was unprecedented in galactic relations. Two apex predator species not merely tolerating each other, but beginning to form genuine bonds of mutual respect. "Status report," he requested from his sister, using the informal tone that indicated family rather than military hierarchy. Sarah's expression grew serious. "The creature you killed was apparently the alpha of its species. We're detecting similar entities throughout this sector, but they're withdrawing rather than attacking. It seems removing their leader has disrupted whatever coordinated activity they were planning. Coordinated activity? Thrackmore's massive form shifted with sudden attention. Explain. Sarah activated a holographic display showing the sector map. Red indicators marked locations where dimensional predators had been detected over the past several months. Pattern analysis suggests they were preparing for a major offensive against inhabited systems. Your hunt didn't just eliminate a threat to this world, it may have prevented a sector-wide extinction event. The implications were staggering. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his injuries. How many inhabited systems in their projected target range? 17, with a combined population of approximately 4 billion sentient beings. Sarah's voice carried the weight of those numbers. Most of them low-tech civilizations that would have been completely defenseless against interdimensional predators. Nexus Wrath, whose cybernetic systems had been repaired by the human technical team, processed this information with visible distress. We came to hunt one creature threatening our outpost. Instead, we discovered a threat to galactic civilization itself. And stopped it, Marcus added quietly. Because Korthak warriors refused to accept defeat, and humans refused to abandon their allies. Thrackmore's massive hand settled on Marcus's shoulder with surprising gentleness. The small human speaks wisdom. Separately, either species might have failed. Together, we achieved what legends will be written about. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the ship's bridge. Lieutenant Kim's voice carried the tension of someone delivering critical intelligence. Commander Chen? We're receiving priority transmissions from Korthak High Command and Earth Central. Both are requesting immediate debriefing on the interdimensional threat. Also, there's something else. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the creature's lair. Something is still active down there. Sarah and Thrackmore exchanged glances heavy with meaning. The battle they'd thought won might be only the opening engagement of a larger conflict. I'm going back down, Marcus announced, attempting to rise from his medical bed despite Doc Martinez's protests. Negative, Sarah replied firmly. You have 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a concussion. You're in no condition for combat operations. Then I guess it's good I'm not planning to fight. Marcus managed to stand, though the effort left him pale and shaking. I'm planning to investigate. Someone needs to understand what we're dealing with, and my analysis was what identified the creature's weaknesses in the first place. Thrackmore studied the human with what might have been admiration or concern. The warrior speaks truth. His mind-hunting skills exceed even our best trackers, but his body weakness makes him vulnerable. Then we protect him. Vextar declared from his own medical bed. The scarred warrior's statement carried the weight of absolute conviction. The human has bled for the pack. The pack protects its own. The vote of confidence from someone who had mocked him just days before struck Marcus more powerfully than any formal recognition. But it was Zephran's quiet support that sealed his determination. I will accompany him, the one-eyed veteran announced. My cybernetic systems interface well with human technology. If the small warrior's mind can identify what remains below, my senses can guard his body. Within an hour, a joint expedition was descending back into the canyon system. Marcus moved carefully but steadily, his battered body supported by a combination of human medical technology and sheer stubborn determination. Beside him, Zephran's augmented senses swept constantly for threats, while Thrackmore led a mixed team of humans and Korthak in overlapping defensive formations. The crater where the ancient predator had emerged was now a perfect circle of crystallized earth, as if something had flash-frozen the molecular structure of rock and soil into geometric precision. At its center, a spiral staircase descended into depths that their senses couldn't fully penetrate. Energy readings are off the charts, reported Specialist Wong from Sarah's technical team. Whatever's down there is generating power levels comparable to a small star. Marcus studied his scanner readings, noting patterns that triggered recognition algorithms in his enhanced memory systems. It's not generating power, it's storing it. The creature we killed wasn't just a predator. It was a repository, a living library of interdimensional knowledge. Thrackmore's amber eyes glowed with hunter's instincts as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. A queen mind. Not just commanding its pack, but preserving their collective experience across centuries. The descent into the creature's lair revealed architecture that defied conventional understanding of space and engineering. Corridors branched in directions that hurt to contemplate, leading to chambers that existed in more than 3 dimensions. But most disturbing were the preservation pods that lined the walls, thousands of them, containing the remains of hunting parties from dozens of species across multiple eras. A museum of conquest, whispered Nexus Wrath, his tracking system struggling to map the impossible geometry. Every species it encountered, every warrior it defeated, all preserved here. But as they penetrated deeper into the structure, Marcus began to detect something that changed everything. The energy signatures weren't random artifacts of alien technology, they were communication protocols, vast databases of information being transmitted across interdimensional channels. "It's not dead," he announced, his voice steady despite the implications. "The creature we killed was just a node in a larger network. The real intelligence, the core consciousness, exists outside our dimensional framework entirely." Sarah's tactical implants immediately began calculating threat assessments. "Are you saying there are more of these things?" "Worse than that." Marcus stopped at an intersection where 5 corridors met, his sensors detecting massive information flows through crystalline conduits embedded in the walls. "I'm saying there's one consciousness that operates through multiple bodies across different dimensions simultaneously. We didn't kill the enemy, we just severed one of its appendages." The revelation sent chills through the entire expedition. If Marcus was correct, then the interdimensional predators represented not just a physical threat, but an intelligence that existed on scales beyond conventional understanding. "How did you fight an enemy that could manifest anywhere, anytime, across multiple realities?" Thrakmor's response was characteristically direct. "Then we learn. We study this place, understand the enemy's nature, and develop tactics to counter it permanently." "Agreed," Sarah said, her military training immediately shifting into strategic planning mode. "But we'll need resources from both species. Human technology for analysis and quantum manipulation, Korthak warrior instincts for understanding predator behavior." As if summoned by their discussion, Vextar's voice crackled over their communication system from the surface. "Alpha, we are receiving visitors. Korthak warfleet approaching from the outer system. They demand immediate audience with you." Thrakmor's expression grew grim. "The High Command has learned of our discovery. They come to claim credit for the victory and dismiss the continuing threat." Marcus felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the recognition that military success often bred political complications.